Stone Vigil hard it is. With what? He found Cure 1 in the very last second before I died. Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, we're playing the newly changed Gunbreaker the day after 7.4 landed. However, we did not get many high-level duties, yet still got some challenges and craziness ahead of us. Starting with Duty 1, which is Nidhogg Normal. The main duty-relevant thing that got a little weird in this one is that my co-tank angled Nidhogg quite strangely at various times. The best explanation I could come up with for this was either that they just didn't really know or care about the fact Nidhogg regularly uses a frontal cone attack, or they were equally worried about tail swipes, a classic among dragons, just not so much in Final Fantasy XIV. For the most part, I don't really do anything about it, but near the end of the fight it almost seemed like the tank was chasing DPS with Nidhogg's face, and that was when I stepped in. For Gunbreaker changes then. Aside from various potency changes on the job, there are only really 2 major changes and 2 minor changes mechanically. The first change is that Bloodfest, the thing that gives you max cartridges, now also doubles your max cartridge space for 30 seconds, so you don't have to worry about making space for said cartridges. Additionally, Bloodfest's cooldown is now 1 minute instead of 2, meaning it perfectly naturally aligns with No Mercy every time. Unfortunately, Bloodfest is level 76, so we don't have that here. The second major change is that Gnashing Fang now has 2 charges instead of just a cooldown. This leads to some interesting optimization I personally call Wicked Mercy at level 100. See my new Gunbreaker guide for more info, link in the description. But below level 100, it simply means the 30-second Gnashing Fangs outside of No Mercy now also go in the No Mercy, which also applies to level 60. The minor changes are that because Gnashing Fang now works on charges, its cooldown is no longer affected by skill speed like it used to. Doesn't really matter, but it is worth mentioning. Second is that Sonic Break's duration is shorter. That's it. Rotationally at level 60, the opener's close to the same as before, as waiting until you have the resources to do 2 Gnashing Fangs before using No Mercy costs you more damage than it is worth. Better just set up and send 1 and then do the next one when you can. Then, every burst after that just becomes 2 full Gnashing Fang combos, a Sonic Break, and then burst strikes and solid barrel and stuff. I was dealing with a wacky GZD in this duty, so I was trying my best to late weave No Mercy to sneak in a 9th GZD with varying levels of success. And indeed, the duty went alright with some random mistakes here and there. For Duty 2, we went to Wanderer's Palace. We visit this one quite frequently recently. For the very start of the dungeon, we have a very long hallway, all things considered, and I decided to pull everything. Here's a tip for doing that, by the way. If you're going to be pulling everything to the degree that the next pull will be a boss anyway, then you will not need a defensive cooldown before you will have one ready in pretty much any normal dungeon. So simply using everything smartly but aggressively on the Giga pull is a solid move. For instance, for this pull I open with Super Bolide, and then as it ends I use both Nebula and Rampart, and by the time I'm starting another AoE pull, I already have Rampart available again, after the boss of course. Thinking ahead about your defensive cooldowns can make it easy to use what you need without getting punished. Naturally, this run went great. For Duty 3, we went to Pharos Sirius, and we do the first Giga pull in the exact same fashion. Now, we ran into some issues with some of the bosses, starting with the first one. Simon's whole gimmick is that most of his mechanics, including the attacks from the hounds, apply a stacking debuff. When it hits 3 stacks, it explodes for AoE damage and vuln stacks. Often, once one person explodes due to this, a chain reaction commences leading to more explosions, more vuln stacks, and death. The primary way this happens in the first place is if the hounds are not dealt with quickly enough. And indeed, in the first pull, it almost seemed like I was the only person attacking the hounds altogether. On the run back, things went a lot better, with the only real change being more attention for the hounds. An aside is that any vuln stacks you may have from the fight will carry over to the start of the next pull, so keep that in mind if you survive with several stacks. The second boss also caused some concerns. possibly as a result of the dancer's standard finish, but what can you do? We ended up being fine in the end, but I did use my invuln just in case it was needed to carry us to the end of the fight. For the rest of the duty, things went pretty normally. For duty 4, we went to Antitower, another level 60 duty. Not that much happened in this one, so I have 2 tips for the last boss. The first tip is that when the gaze eye marker appears on a player, it means the boss will use a gaze mechanic cone in their direction, meaning that player has to look away, but everyone else just has to get away from them. Very confusing. The second tip is when the boss casts Brace, get in front of the boss as it will start countering attacks from any other direction than that. Take note, it also turns to face a random direction for this. For duty 5, we went to Porta Decumana and Niners the Samurai knew me. Hello! As is tradition with MSQ roulette duties, we see some odd performances here and there. The Black Mage mostly had minor things like using Blizzard 3 twice for their Ice Phase and sometimes casting Fire 1 straight from there, but overall it was probably okay. The Astrologian spent significant amounts of time not attacking at all and, more importantly, really liked using Helios. Not aspected, just regular Helios. I feel like the ultimate cast at the end also got very close. For duty 6, we went to new Dzemael Darkhold after the changes. Let's take it from the top. The first third of the dungeon, all of the crystal light that makes you nigh invulnerable have been removed. All of the mobs are mostly still there though. The boss flying around to pester you has been confined to his boss room from the very start. The Magitech terminals have been removed and the doors are simply open by default now. As a result, there's nothing preventing you from pulling everything from the start of the dungeon all the way into the boss room, if you like. Which makes that hypothetical pull a contestant for the hardest gigapull in the game, which is a pretty massive change from before where the Crystal Light made this whole section probably one of the easiest dungeon sections in the entire game. The boss now has mechanics instead of mostly summoning ads that did nothing because of Crystal Light. Not hard mechanics, but arguably more going on than the old version. The standout mechanic is Void Matter, 3 waves of circle AoEs. On the one hand, the rework makes the first third of the dungeon straight up harder, but I do think the Crystal Light and Magitech terminals made for a more interesting dungeon. The second third is completely unchanged. However, that should come as little surprise since a long time ago, this section was changed, where they removed a whole cliff you could fall down from into more packs. So this section has actually already been updated years ago. The second boss got some minor changes too. The main things I noticed was that you can't target it before it enters the arena now. I think the various circle AoEs are new too. I think they made the fight use more avoidable mechanics in place of unavoidable mechanics, but it definitely made for a more boring fight. For the last third, the whole Magitech terminals thing is gone, and the packs have been rearranged, quite blatantly might I add, into 2 packs, and when you kill both, the door opens. The final boss has 2 standout changes. The first one is that the no warning spin AoEs now has a clear telegraph and a significant cast time. I've been told that its damage has been significantly increased to match. I think this is a good change because before there was 0 counterplay to the mechanic. Since there was no tell, range simply had to stay away and melees just had to take the damage, making it ultimately a healer problem disguised as something else. The other change is that in the final bit of the fight, void zones no longer appear. Again, these void zones spawned rather randomly and were mostly out of the way anyway, so them being gone doesn't change much. It is a shame they weren't replaced with something else, but them being gone doesn't change much. I do find it peculiar that the actual tank buster is still a no warning attack, but at least overall I'd say the changes to this boss make sense and are a very, very mild improvement. What do you think? For duty 7, we went to Drowned City of Skalla, a level 70 dungeon. The only really significant change for Gunbreaker from 60 to 70 now is that if you're late weaving No Mercy to sneak in a 9th GZD, you really want to be sure the 9th GZD is not part of the Gnashing Fang combo, since the continuation step probably won't fit. That said, the final boss has some wacky mechanics that tends to catch players, so let's talk about those for a bit. First, when the boss lifts their claw up, it means frontal cone, not tank buster, take it with your face. When it lifts its tail up, it means backside cone. Even bigger, by the way. And finally, when it faces a random player and raises both hands, it means Lionewi to dodge. This one tends to catch players the most. Probably mostly because they come in waves, because the second most likely to catch players tends to be the tail swipe. Essentially, the boss gimmick is no telegraphs, use eyes. For duty 8, we went to Brayflox Longstop with a strange healer. At the very start of the duty, they do nothing for the first several seconds, simply running up to me. Then, the exact very last frame before my death, a Cure 1 hits me, and they simply spam Cure 1. I want you to understand that they knew what Cure 2 was, as they used it unprompted later. For some reason, they just really wanted to use Cure 1. Then, after this ridiculous pull, they show what maybe had them distracted at the start, as they share with me the loss meme. If you don't get it, no worries, there isn't that much to get. Point is, why? I don't have issues with meme boards, but make sure you can send it without risking a wipe due to not paying attention. On the first boss, the healer also starts by doing some attacks and even using Cure 2, and then, as if they remembered they were memeing, they revert back to just Cure 1 and standing around. On the pull after the second boss, I end up dying primarily due to the healer again being seemingly deliberately slow and again preferring to use only Cure 1. Take note that their equipped title means that they are at least level 60 on White Mage, and also take note that they continue using Cure 1 even when they have free Cure. They claim that they are new and still learning, so I give them a couple pointers to at least keep my side clean. Here's what I told them. 1. Use Cure 2 when healing is actually needed. Cure 1 is unnecessary for the most part. Cure 2 saves more time. 2. Use that time to attack instead. And most importantly, 3. Each of these tips were served with a, quote, if you are actually genuine about being new and needing help, don't open the duty by almost wiping us because you wanted to send a meme. In fact, maybe don't send memes because it means that I'm going to assume you're actually messing with me when you're doing this stuff. Unquote. And if it wasn't clear from how I'm describing the events of this duty, no, I do not actually believe this player genuinely needed that advice. I am willing to believe they were actively messing with me. The weird slowness of running up for each pull, only using Cure 1 and not spending free Cure at the very least, not to mention the parts where they seemed to know what to do and then suddenly stopped knowing what to do. And yet, despite all of this, they were frame 1 swift cast racing me when things went wrong. Anyway, aside from the one time I died in the duty and the time I almost died, we still managed, but if they were actually memeing, all I can do is shake my head. Why? I'm not angry, just disappointed. A bit later, I also have another duty with a healer that actually looked like a legitimate Sprout needing help, which further makes this one seem strangely suspicious. Moving on, for duty 9, we went to New Aurum Vale. For the dungeon as a whole, they got some plumbing done, so all the yellow goop is largely gone from boss rooms and the main path. For the first room, I think they have moved a few mobs a tiny bit, possibly leading to +1 pack of lilies for the pull into the boss room. I would also suggest that maybe the frogs don't do the pull in anymore, but that might just have been random luck. On the other hand, the frogs can still reset, so that weird thing has not been changed. Overall, the goop didn't matter in the first room, and the pull is largely the same, so I would say mostly unchanged. For the first boss, its cone tank buster now has a cast time, and eating a fruit is accompanied by a 20-second lockout from eating another fruit. Also, the fruit doesn't despawn when you eat it, there's just 4 fruit stations. My observation here is that due to the cast times on the tank buster, the boss takes longer to get through its list of actions, which means it takes too long for the boss to get around to the gold lung debuff stacks. 2 stacks is mildly threatening, but For the most part, 3 stacks is typically where you really want to cleanse, and the boss didn't really reach this. Overall, I think adding a cast time to the tank buster is good, as it makes it more reactable. However, this addition may not have taken into consideration that this slows down the rest of the fight, so that could have been done a bit better. Oh yeah, and the gold lung debuff is automatically removed after the fight now. For the second third, the first room has less seedlings and no goop. For the second room, they removed a side pack and the patrol and moved another side pack closer to the center to make it unavoidable. Mostly unchanged, as you would just pull the patrol and the main pack anyway. The second boss already got changed ages ago to have telegraphs, so nothing really changed there this time. For the third section, they shrunk the first pack and maybe removed a mob here and there. For the second bit, they moved the 2 big marbles closer together and removed some of the seedlings. For the final boss, Vine Probe now has a clear cast bar, and if you try to run away, the boss chases you down to use it, making it harder to sidestep, if it's even possible anymore. I think they also reduced the number of seedlings the boss summons by 1, but not sure, not that it matters. I think they have removed the cast bar from a single target Burrow's attack, but it also feels like it does less damage. And finally, they moved the loot chest at the end of the dungeon 5 fulms to the right to be closer to the exit. How could they? Overall, I feel like the dungeon is mostly unchanged for the average player, as the main things removed or changed only really affected the first timer experience, if even that, making the duty really mean. The changes make for a more consistent experience without taking difficulty away from said consistent experience. The first boss is a bit of a loser, and they should make Gold Lung come up more frequently. A lot more frequently to justify the presence of the fruits, in my opinion. For Duty 10, we went to Halatali. I think we had possibly multiple first-timers to the duty, which means that the probably most interesting part of the run is after the first boss. The way this section works is that you progress through the halls. There are 5 chain winches that must be interacted with. Taking damage while interacting cancels it, so essentially, the tank cannot do it without clearing the pack attacking them. The way I handle this as a tank is that I will pull everything to the first winch and wait until someone interacts with it before continuing, since either the pack is cleared, so I can do it myself, or someone does it for me. By the time you reach the third winch, I start marking them to indicate what the problem is, and everyone in the party comes to assist immediately, which lets me know that they didn't know that it mattered. An important detail. Nice, immediate improvement, and the rest of the duty went perfectly well. And finally, for Duty 11, we went to Stone Vigil hard with an archer that I'm willing to suggest did not speak English. Our healer also appears to be very legitimately a Sprout White Mage. They also said that they were a 5-year-ago returning player, so this duty becomes quite interesting. In comparison to the White Mage in Brayflox earlier, the way this one plays is way more in line with what I would expect from an actually inexperienced healer that is a bit afraid of making a mistake. They use all of the cures, but also make active use of free cure and adjusts the cure based on what seems needed. The cure 3 was a misclick according to themselves. As the first big pull had them spamming so many heals, they actually went completely out of MP, just like that. I paused to give them some tips about attacking, holy, and being more conservative with their MP. Conveniently, all these tips also gave the healer a chance to recover their MP. While these tips aren't applied perfectly directly at once, the healer starts attacking more and tries different things throughout the duty, which I think is a good sign. What really surprised me next was on the turtle boss, the archer eventually, with no help, figured out they should use the cannon. However, due to various things, the fight dragged on long enough for hard stop to come up with me being unable to stun it. Thankfully, it didn't lead to a wipe. After this point, our healer also starts to experiment a bit with letting me drop below max, which gets a little dicey, but you gotta learn. This does reach a point where I die because I used my invuln a moment too late. We continue onward. The final boss is another one of those with 0 telegraphs. On top of that, it also has no aggro table, so it is all about dodging. We of course make it through that fight with no worries about wiping. I hope the White Mage will continue their journey to improve further. An interesting set where we conveniently managed to experience all of the recently reworked dungeons in one batch. We also have some sprouts that seem to actually need the practice and help. But we not only didn't get that many duties, but also nothing past level 70, which is a bit of a shame when I want to show off new Gunbreaker a lot more. We also had 0 guild tests and hit 19/30ths on the achievement. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi, links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Dawntrail, Sonic Break had its own cooldown of 60 seconds, scaling with skill speed. However, you pretty much exclusively used it during No Mercy anyway, so with the release of Dawntrail, it was made an action ready kinda button instead, and then by default merged with No Mercy.